At my husband's funeral, the world smelled of wet wool and suffocating lilies. It was raining that morning, a relentless fine gray drizzle that soaked through black coats and skin alike, chilling everything it touched. The interior of the church felt heavy, the air thick with the murmur of polite grief and the damp scent of umbrellas collapsing in the vestibule. People whispered, hugged, and avoided my eyes. I barely registered any of it. I was a ghost at my own tragedy. My husband's coffin stood in front of me, a mahogany box gleaming under the dim church lights, covered in a spray of white roses. White roses. I stared at them, my hands clenched in my lap. They were his sister Serafina's choice, not mine. I kept thinking about the color. White, too clean, too quiet, too sterile. Silas had hated white roses. He used to say they looked like they belonged in a hospital, flowers meant to sanitize death rather than mourn it. That small detail haunted me, itching at the back of my brain. It made the whole ceremony feel slightly off balance, like a photograph printed with the wrong tint. When the pastor started speaking, droning on about peace and eternal rest, I stopped hearing the words. My mind drifted, untethered. The sound of raindrops tapping against the stained glass windows felt louder than his voice, a rhythmic, insistent drumming that sounded like fingers on a tabletop. My daughter Harper sat to my left. She was weeping softly, her head bowed. I wanted to reach out to her to squeeze her hand, but I felt paralyzed, frozen in a block of ice that refused to thaw. Harper's husband, Caleb, had his arm around her, pulling her tight against his side. Too tight. Then I saw him. It happened in the space between two heartbeats. My gaze had wandered to the back of the church, past the rows of mournful faces, past the colleagues from the law firm, to the shadows near the heavy oak doors. He was standing there, half hidden behind two tall men in dark suits. His face was pale, thinner than I remembered, the cheekbones sharper, but it was unmistakable. My husband, Silas. For a moment, my brain simply refused to process the data. It was a glitch in reality. I blinked, expecting the hallucination to dissolve into the grain of the wood paneling. My pulse stuttered, skipping a beat and then hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. He shouldn't be there. He couldn't asterisk be there. We were burying him. The certificate was signed. The police report was filed. But he was there. He met my eyes across the crowded nave. That calm, deliberate look I knew better than my own reflection. There was no panic in his expression, no fear, just a terrifying, laser-focused intensity. He held my gaze for a second that stretched into an eternity. Then, slowly, purposefully, he raised a single finger to his lips. SHH. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. The floor beneath the pew felt like the deck of a ship listing in a storm. I gripped the wood in front of me, my knuckles turning white, terrified I might faint or scream. He was alive. Before I could move, before I could breathe, a hand touched my shoulder. Alina, you should sit, you look pale. The voice was sweet, soft, cloying. Serafina Sterling, Silas's sister. I hadn't realized I'd started to rise. I looked up at her. Her face was a mask of perfect, curated sympathy, but her eyes were cold, assessing. Her hand on my shoulder wasn't comforting. It was heavy, firm, possessive. She was pushing me down, not holding me up. I thought I saw. My voice cracked, dry as dead leaves. Hush now, Serafina whispered, her grip tightening just enough to be painful. Sit down, darling. Grief does strange things to the mind. You're exhausted. I nodded dumbly and sank back onto the hard bench. My eyes darted back to the spot near the doors, desperate for confirmation, for proof that I hadn't finally snapped. The spot was empty. I searched the faces in the crowd. Lawyers, neighbors, distant cousins, business partners from the Sterling group. No one looked back at me. No one seemed to have noticed a dead man walking. Maybe Serafina was right. Maybe grief had finally cracked something inside me. When the service ended, I moved through the line of condolences like an automaton. People murmured the same hollow phrases. He was a good man. He'll be missed. So sorry for your loss. I nodded, shook hands that felt like cold fish, and tried to breathe. Harper was still clinging to Caleb. My son-in-law kept glancing at me. He was smiling politely, thanking people for coming, but his eyes were sharp, darting around the room, calculating. There was no sorrow in Caleb Thorne, only tension. Outside, under the slate-gray sky, the air was cold enough to bite. I stepped away from the crowd, pretending to fumble with the buttons of my coat, and checked my phone. I just needed to look at something that wasn't a pitying face. A notification blinked on the screen. A new message, unknown number. "Run, they're watching us." I froze, the breath hitched in my throat, turning into a small, strangled sound. The timestamp was from 1 minute ago. My hands started to tremble, violently enough that I almost dropped the device. I reread it, the letters blurring through the rain on the screen. "They're watching us." Us. That single word hit me like an electric shock, jolting my heart back into a frantic rhythm. Whoever sent this wasn't just warning me. They were including themselves with me. It was Sela's. It had to be. My heart pounded so loudly it drowned out the sound of the rain and the murmuring crowd. I turned slowly, trying to look casual, scanning the parking lot. A few people lingered by their cars, hugging, talking softly. Nothing unusual. Then I saw it. A black SUV parked across the street, idling. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like oil slicks. I couldn't see who was inside, but the nose of the car was pointed directly at the church exit. Directly at me. I looked away quickly, forcing myself to breathe evenly. In, out, in, out. Elena. I jumped. Serafina was beside me again, seemingly materializing out of the mist. Caleb was with her now, leaving Harper by their car. "You shouldn't drive alone today," Serafina said, her voice smooth as polished glass. "Come with us. Caleb will drive your car home later, or we can have it towed. You need to be with family." Her tone left no room for refusal. It wasn't an offer. It was a command wrapped in silk. Caleb stepped closer, blocking my path to the parking lot. "She's right, Elena," Caleb said. His voice was deep, authoritative. "You're shaking. Let us take care of you." I looked at them, really looked at them. For the first time, I didn't see family. I saw jailers. I saw the way Serafina stood, angling her body to cut off my escape. I saw the way Caleb's hand rested near his pocket, his posture tense, ready to grab me if I stumbled. "Run," the text burned in my mind. "I'll be fine," I forced a faint, watery smile. I just need a little time. A few minutes alone in the car to compose myself before I head back to the house." Serafina's eyes narrowed. The mask slipped, just for a fraction of a second, revealing a flash of irritation. "Elena, don't be difficult, we insist." "I'm not being difficult, Serafina," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'm grieving. Please, just let me drive myself." I didn't wait for an answer. I stepped around Caleb, brushing past his shoulder. I felt him tense, felt the urge radiating off him to reach out and stop me, but there were too many witnesses still lingering in the churchyard. He wouldn't make a scene. Not here. Not yet. "Just don't isolate yourself, darling," Serafina called after me, her voice sharpening. "Grief makes people do irrational things." I kept walking. I could feel their eyes boring into my back, heavy and hot. I reached my car, a silver sedan that suddenly felt like a lifeboat. My fingers were so cold and clumsy that I dropped the keys twice into a puddle before managing to unlock the door. I scrambled inside, hitting the lock button the instant the door slammed shut. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely grip the steering wheel. I started the engine. Buzz. Another message appeared, unknown. "Don't go home." I swallowed hard, my throat feeling like it was full of broken glass. My eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. Serafina and Caleb were walking toward their car now briskly, not running but moving with purpose. Serafina was on her phone. Caleb was watching me. I didn't think, I just drove. I peeled out of the church lot, tires spinning on the wet asphalt. I drove through the rain, through the blurred streets of the town I had lived in for 20 years. Suddenly, the manicured lawns and familiar storefronts felt foreign, like a movie set designed to hide something rotting underneath. My husband was alive. Someone was watching me. And whatever this was, it had started long before today. I reached the main intersection. Left went toward our house in the suburbs, the house filled with sympathy cards and casseroles. Right went toward the highway. Don't go home. I turned right. As I merged onto the highway, putting distance between myself and the church, my phone buzzed again. Trust no one, not even them. I didn't sleep that night. I drove until my fuel light blinked, 3 towns away from anything familiar. I found a motel off the interstate, the kind of place where the neon sign flickered with a buzzing headache and no one asked for ID if you paid in cash. The room smelled of bleach and damp carpet. The rain was still falling, tapping against the thin window pane like fingers insisting I stay awake. I sat on the edge of the bed, my coat still on, my phone in my hands. I stared at that last message. Trust no one, not even them. Them. I thought of Serafina's perfect sympathy, her grip on my shoulder. I thought of Caleb's polite restraint, the way he hovered over Harper, isolating her. The 3 people who had surrounded me since Silas's death, always near, always guiding my every move, answering my phone, screening my visitors. Suddenly, every comforting gesture from the past week looked like choreography. They hadn't been supporting me, they had been handling me. At around 3:00 a.m., I made tea using the dusty coffee maker in the corner. The motel room was silent, stripped of Silas's presence. No faint hum of his late-night work calls, no papers scattered on the counter, no half-drunk coffee mug. It didn't feel like grief anymore. It felt like I had woken up in a different universe. I opened my laptop, tethering it to my phone's hotspot. I typed Silas Vance into the search bar. Dozens of news articles appeared, all saying the same thing. Local attorney found dead after car accident on Route 27. Vehicle fire. Body identified through dental records. I clicked on the images. I stared at the photo of the wreck. The car, Silas's vintage Mustang, was unrecognizable. It was a twisted heap of charred metal melted into the asphalt. The thought came sharply, like a blade cutting through fog. It didn't have to be him inside. If the body was burned beyond recognition, the only identification was the dental records. That was the anchor of the official story. But dental records are just files. They can be moved. They can be swapped. That would require access, connections, and money. Silas had access. Serafina had the money. I scrolled further down the page. Comments from colleagues, clients, family. Condolences from the Sterling Group. Statements from Serafina Sterling expressing her devastation. The timing of some posts struck me. The official statement from the firm appeared mere hours after the crash, fully drafted, polished. That was fast. Too fast. Unless they had it ready. Unless they knew. My throat tightened, but not from sadness. It was clarity. For the first time in days, the fog of shock was lifting, revealing something solid and jagged underneath. Resolve. If Silas was alive, he had a reason to hide. If he warned me to run, that reason involved danger. Immediate physical danger. But danger from whom? From Serafina? From Caleb? From someone at the firm? I closed my eyes and replayed the funeral frame by frame. Serafina's firm grip on my arm. You shouldn't drive alone. Caleb's sharp looks. Let us take care of you. Control. They were trying to control me. They wanted me in that car. They wanted me back in the house, isolated, where they could watch me. Why? Because I was the loose end. I opened my messages again. The number that had texted me was hidden. No contact name, no profile photo. I typed back, my fingers shaking slightly. Who are you? Where is Silas? No reply. I waited 10 minutes, 20, an hour, nothing. When the dawn started to brighten the dirty window of the motel room, turning the sky a bruised purple, I realized I needed to make a choice. For days, I'd let them plan everything. The funeral, the guests, the arrangements. I'd moved through their schedule like a puppet on strings. Now I was done. I picked up my phone and dialed Harper. She answered on the second ring, her voice heavy with sleep and medication. Mom, are you okay? Caleb said you drove off. We were so worried. I'm fine, I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Listen to me, Harper. I'm going to take a few days off. I need to clear my head, the house. It's too quiet. Where will you go? Harper asked. She sounded small, frightened. I'm not sure yet, just driving. Don't worry, I'll text you when I get settled. There was a pause, and then I heard a muffled voice in the background. Low, male, Caleb. Put it on speaker, I heard him say. I froze. Mom, Caleb just wants to. I'll call you later, Harper, I cut her off. I love you. I ended the call before she could protest, before Caleb could get on the line and use that smooth, commanding voice to reel me back in. I stared at the phone, my pulse steady now. I didn't need to explain myself, not anymore. I started making a list on the back of a motel notepad, an old habit from the years when Silas worked long hours and I managed everything else, the household, the finances, the social calendar. Lists gave order to chaos. Things I know, asterisk. 1. Silas is alive. 2. Someone warned me to run. 3. Serafina and Caleb are too involved. 4. The accident was staged. Things I need to find out, asterisk. 1. Why did he fake his death? 2. Who is watching us? 3. Where is he now? It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. Around noon, Serafina called. I stared at her name on the screen, Serafina Sterling. It looked like a threat now. I answered. Elena, sweetheart, are you home? I stopped by, but your car isn't in the drive. I brought lunch. You shouldn't be alone. Her voice was perfect, concerned, loving. I hesitated, then said quietly, I'm fine, Serafina. Please don't come by. I just need some time away. I'm not at the house. A short silence stretched over the line. Then her tone changed. It was almost imperceptible, a slight drop in temperature. Where are you, Elena? Away, I said. I'll be in touch. You really shouldn't be wandering around in your state, she said, the edge of steel returning to her voice. Tell me where you are. Caleb can come get you. No, I said. Elena. Goodbye, Serafina. I hung up. I exhaled slowly, the air rushing out of my lungs. That was the first time I had ever said no to her. It felt dangerous, and it felt liberating. The rest of the day, I packed my small bag. I had thrown things in haphazardly before the funeral, but now I organized. Cash, chargers, laptop. I took out my credit cards and stared at them. They were traceable. If Serafina was watching, she would see every transaction. I couldn't use them. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. Dark circles under my eyes, hair messy, skin pale against the harsh bathroom light. I looked like a victim. I straightened my spine. My plan was simple. I would check out of this motel and move further away. I would find a place where no one asked questions, somewhere anonymous, and start digging from there. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for yet, but I knew one thing. If Silas Vance risked everything to fake his death, his career, his reputation, his family, there had to be something big, something worth dying for or pretending to. I grabbed my bag and walked to the door. Before leaving, I looked back at the messy bed, the empty coffee cup. I was leaving Elena Vance, the grieving widow, behind in this room. I stepped out into the damp afternoon air. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still a threatening shade of iron. I threw my bag into the passenger seat and got behind the wheel. I wasn't running away anymore. I was hunting for the truth, and this time the choices would be mine. The motel I chose was 3 hours north, tucked just off the interstate where the highway bled into dense pine woods. It was called the Blue Heron, though the neon sign only illuminated the letters *LU* and RON*, buzzing with the manic energy of a dying insect. The room smelled faintly of bleach, stale cigarette smoke, and damp carpet. It was a place where people came to disappear or to hide things they didn't want the daylight to touch. I threw my bag onto the sagging mattress and locked the door, sliding the chain into place. It felt flimsy against the weight of what I was running from, but it was a boundary. I pulled the curtains shut, blocking out the gray afternoon, and set up my station on the small, scarred laminate table. My laptop, a notepad, and a cheap prepaid phone I'd bought at a gas station with cash. I turned my main phone off and buried it deep in my suitcase. If Serafina had tracking software on it, and knowing her, she did, I was now a ghost. I wasn't a detective. I was a literature teacher. I knew how to deconstruct narratives, how to find the theme in a chaotic story. And right now, the story of Silas's death had a plot hole. I opened the laptop and began retracing every step of Silas's last recorded day. According to the news reports and the digital copy of the police blotter, the accident happened late at night on Route 27. The narrative was simple. He was driving home from a client meeting, lost control on a slick curve, and struck a guardrail. The car went over the embankment and ignited. But Silas hated Route 27. It was a winding, unlit stretch of road notorious for black ice and deer. He always took the turnpike, even if it added 20 minutes. Why was he there? I pulled up the official police report, which was public record. It listed the responding officer, the cause of death, blunt force trauma and thermal injuries, and the ID confirmation. Everything looked legitimate. Every box was perfectly checked, every date aligned. It was administrative perfection. Too perfect. Life is messy. Paperwork usually reflects that. This looked like it had been proofread by a legal team. Then I noticed it. I leaned closer to the screen, squinting at the scanned PDF. The accident was reported via a 911 call at *11. 42 p.m., the responding officer arrived at *11, 58 p.m. But the coroner's preliminary report, attached to the bottom of the file, listed the time of death declaration at *12, 06 a.m. That wasn't strange on its own. It takes time to declare a death, but the location of the declaration wasn't the crash site. It was listed as County Sector 4. I opened a map tab. I typed in the coordinates of the crash on Route 27. Then I looked up County Sector 4. My breath hitched. Sector 4 was 15 miles away. If Silas died in the crash, he would have been declared dead at the scene by the paramedics or the coroner upon arrival. If he was transported to a hospital, he would have been declared there. But Sector 4 was an old industrial park, nowhere near a hospital or the morgue. How does a body, burned beyond recognition inside a wreck, get declared dead 15 miles away, 24 minutes later? I copied the details, saving them to an encrypted drive. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear anymore, but from the vibration of adrenaline. This was real. The math didn't work, and if the math didn't work, the story was a lie. I needed to verify the anchor of the lie, the identification. The report cited positive identification via dental records provided by family dentist. I took a deep breath, picked up the prepaid phone, and dialed Dr. Kincaid's office. I had known Dr. Kincaid for 20 years. He had put braces on Harper's teeth. The phone rang 3 times before his assistant, a bubbly woman named Patty, picked up. Dr. Kincaid's office, how can I help you? I forced my voice to be steady, adopting a tone of weary bureaucracy. Hi, Patty, it's Alina Vance. Oh, Mrs. Vance. Her voice dropped an octave, dripping with instant sympathy. I am so sorry. We were all devastated to hear about Silas. Dr. Kincaid wanted to send flowers, but we saw the notice about donations to charity instead. Thank you, Patty. That means a lot. I paused, swallowing the dryness in my throat. I'm actually calling about some of the insurance paperwork. It's a nightmare, as you can imagine. Of course, hun. What do you need? The insurance adjuster is asking for a confirmation of when the dental records were sent to the coroner. They're claiming there's a timestamp error or something. Could you just check your outgoing log and tell me what day you sent Silas's file over? There was the sound of typing on the other end. Sure, let me just pull up the transfer log. Hold on a sec. I stared at the peeling wallpaper of the motel room, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Please say you sent them. Please make me crazy. That's odd, Patty murmured. The air in the room seemed to vanish. What is it? I don't see a transfer request, she said. We haven't sent any files for Mr. Vance in, well, years, not since his last checkup. Are you sure? I gripped the phone tighter. Maybe Dr. Kincaid did it himself after hours. It was an emergency. Dr. Kincaid has been in Maui all week, Alina. He gets back tomorrow, and I'm the only one with the encryption key for digital transfers. If those records went out, I would have sent them. A cold silence stretched between us. Mrs. Vance, are you still there? Yes, I whispered. I must have the wrong form, thank you, Patty. Let us know if you need anything, okay. I hung up and let the phone drop onto the table. The room felt heavier, the shadows in the corners stretching out toward me. The identification had been falsified. Someone had used Silas's dental records or a fake set labeled with his name, without the dentist's knowledge. Dr. Kincaid was out of town. Patty hadn't sent them. Who had handled the coroner? Who had generously taken over the burden of the paperwork so the grieving widow didn't have to deal with the gruesome details? Serafina. I sat back, feeling a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with illness. Serafina had handled everything. The arrangements, the press release, the quick cremation order that I had signed in a haze of Valium and tears. She had kept me protected from the details, she said. I just want to spare you, Alina. I had believed her because grief makes you compliant. It breaks your defenses and makes you crave a caretaker. But she wasn't a caretaker. She was a cleaner. She knew the body in that car wasn't Sila's. She knew because she had helped arrange the cover-up. My sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard knot in my stomach. They thought I would break down and disappear into my sadness, playing the role of the tragic, wealthy widow. They thought I was soft. I opened a new tab on my browser, Silas's email. We had a rule, no secrets, but we also respected privacy. I knew his password only because he was sentimental. It was the date of our first trip to Paris, combined with the name of the street where he proposed. I typed it in, Rue Claire 0612. Access granted. The inbox loaded. It was disturbingly empty. The received folder had been scrubbed clean. No client emails, no spam, nothing from the last month. Serafina must not have thought I'd check. Or maybe she thought deleting the inbox was enough. But Silas was paranoid about data loss. He never deleted anything permanently. He archived it. I clicked on the *archive ** folder. It was mostly mundane. Receipts, old confirmations. But there was a subfolder labeled simply, Holloway. I clicked it. There were 5 emails, all from a sender named ** Julian Mercer ***. I didn't recognize the name, but the tone of the messages was frantic. I opened the last one, sent 3 days before the accident. The subject line stopped my heart. Subject, you were right, they know. I began to read. Sila's ***. You were right about the Sterling Group contracts. I traced the shell companies. They've been funneling client money through the development fund for months. It's not just tax evasion, it's laundering. Big numbers, millions. I found the authorization signatures. I thought it would be Serafina, but she's smart. She kept her name off the direct transfers. It's Caleb. Caleb is signing off on the diversion accounts. They're using him as the fall guy, or he's in deeper than we thought. I'm leaving town tonight. Serafina's security guy was waiting outside my apartment this morning. If you have the drive, hide it. Get Alina and get out. Don't trust the firm. Destroy everything. Julian. I sat frozen, the blue light of the laptop screen illuminating the horror on my face. Caleb. My son-in-law, the man who stood beside my daughter at the funeral, holding her while she cried. The man who had looked at me with those calculating, sharp eyes. The pieces clicked into place with a quiet, terrifying logic. Silas had uncovered a massive embezzlement scheme inside the firm. Serafina was the architect, but Caleb, Harper's husband, was the executioner. He was signing the checks. He was the accomplice. That's why Silas had faked his death. He wasn't just running from a vague threat. He was running from his own family. If he had gone to the police, Serafina would have destroyed him before he could testify. Or worse, they would have used Harper as leverage against him because she was married to one of the criminals. He had to die to get free. And now, I was the only one who knew. I looked at the date of the email again. Julian Mercer had disappeared 3 days before Silas died. Was Julian alive? Or was he the reason Silas knew he had to run? I felt a surge of adrenaline so potent it made my vision blur. They were monsters. Not just criminals, but monsters who sat at our dinner table, drank our wine, and plotted our destruction. I needed to move. I needed physical proof. Digital files could be dismissed as hacked or forged, but there was one place where the truth couldn't be edited. The cemetery. If the dental records were fake, then the body in that grave, if there even was a body, wasn't Silas. And if I could prove that, I could blow their entire narrative apart. I grabbed the motel's stationery, a flimsy piece of paper with a coffee stain on the corner. I uncapped a pen. My hand was steady now. The shaking was gone. I wrote one sentence. If you're reading this, I found you first. I wasn't sure who I was writing it to. Maybe Silas, maybe the universe, maybe just to myself to cement the transition from victim to hunter. I folded the note and tucked it into my pocket. Then I stood up. I went to the mirror again. The woman looking back at me was no longer the pale ghost from the church. Her eyes were hard. Her jaw was set. Serafina Sterling thought she had buried her brother and silenced his wife. She thought she was playing chess with a pawn. She was about to find out that the queen was still on the board. I packed the laptop, wiped my fingerprints off the table out of habit, and grabbed the keys. It was dark outside now, the perfect time to visit a grave. The cemetery sat on a low hill overlooking the town, a sprawling expanse of gray stone and manicured grass that looked colorless under the heavy, overcast sky. The air here was different, still, damp, and smelling of turned earth and decaying leaves. It was the kind of weather that made sound travel strangely far. The distant hum of the highway felt like it was vibrating right under my feet. I parked my car near the wrought iron gates and walked the rest of the way. My boots crunched loudly on the wet gravel path. The silence of the dead felt judgmental, as if the rows of headstones were watching the intruder who dared to question the finality of their rest. Silas's grave was at the far end, beneath a weeping maple tree that was just starting to shed its leaves. The headstone hadn't been placed yet. In its place was a temporary marker, a small metal rectangle with a typed card. Silas Vance, beloved husband and brother. The soil was mounded high, covered in the sod they had laid down just yesterday. It looked too neat, too precise. And there, sitting atop the fresh grass, was the bouquet of white roses Serafina had placed on the coffin. They were already beginning to brown at the edges, rotting in the damp air. I knelt beside the mound, ignoring the wet cold seeping into my jeans. I brushed a few dead leaves away from the marker. I wasn't sure what I expected to find here. Proof. Closure. Maybe I just needed to look at the ground and tell myself that my husband wasn't down there, that the box 6 feet under contained nothing but ash and lies. I found you, I whispered to the dirt, and I'm not going to let them get away with it. I stood up, wiping the mud from my hands. As I turned to leave, I heard it, the slow, deliberate crunch of tires on gravel. I froze. A silver sedan, sleek and expensive, was rolling slowly up the narrow cemetery path. It stopped 20 yards away. The engine cut. The silence rushed back in, heavier than before. The driver's door opened, and Serafina Sterling stepped out. She was immaculate. Even here in the mud and gloom, she looked like she had stepped out of a magazine spread. Her black wool coat was tailored to perfection, her hair pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. She carried a small umbrella, though it wasn't raining anymore. It was a prop, a shield. "I thought I might find you here," she said. Her voice carried effortlessly across the distance, smooth and calm. I didn't move. I stood my ground near the grave, letting her come to me. "You've been tracking my phone." Serafina smiled, a small, pitying curve of her lips. She stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume, something floral and cold, like frozen gardenias. "We've been worried, Alina," she said. "You vanished. You wouldn't answer calls, people talk. They think you're having a breakdown." "Is that what you told them?" I asked, keeping my voice flat. "That I'm crazy." "I told them you were grieving," she corrected gently. "I told them you needed space, but running away to cheap motels, digging into police reports, that doesn't look like grief, darling. It looks like paranoia." My stomach tightened. She knew. She knew about the motel. She knew I had pulled the reports. "I'm just trying to understand what happened to my husband," I said. "It was an accident," she sighed, a sound of practiced patience. "A tragedy. Why torture yourself with the details?" "Because the details don't add up, Serafina." Her expression didn't change, but the air around her seemed to drop a few degrees. She took a step closer, invading my personal space. "What doesn't add up?" "The timeline," I said, locking eyes with her. "The crash site and the identification." She blinked once slowly. "The identification was confirmed. You know that." "By dental records," I said. "Records that Dr. Kincaid's office never sent." The silence that followed was absolute. The wind died down. The birds stopped singing. For a terrifying second, Serafina Sterling looked completely blank, her face a porcelain mask stripped of humanity. Then she smiled. But this time, it didn't reach her eyes. Her pupils had contracted into pinpricks of obsidian. "You've been busy," she murmured. The warmth was gone from her voice. The sisterly concern had evaporated, replaced by something metallic and sharp. "I called his office," I pressed, my heart hammering against my ribs but my voice steady. "They have no record of the transfer. Someone faked it. Someone wanted that body identified as Sela's fast and without questions. That requires influence, Serafina. It requires money." She stared at me, her head tilting slightly to the side, like a hawk studying a field mouse. "You think I did it?" "I think you handled everything," I said. "You kept the casket closed. You rushed the cremation. You control the narrative." She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a whisper that felt louder than a scream. "You are digging into things you do not understand, Alina. You are playing detective in a world where the rules are written by people like me." "Is he alive?" I asked. "Is that why you're here, to make sure I don't find him?" Serafina laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Alive! Oh, Alina, you really are desperate. Sela's is gone. And if you keep scratching at this, you're going to find nothing but dirt." "I don't believe you." "Belief is irrelevant," she snapped. The mask was fully off now. Her face was hard, the lines of age and stress suddenly visible beneath the makeup. "Here is the reality. You are a widow with a dwindling bank account and a fragile mental state. I am the head of the Sterling Group. If you try to peddle these conspiracy theories, I will have you committed. I will paint you as a hysteric who couldn't handle the loss." "You can't hide the records," I said. "I have proof." "You have nothing," she hissed. "You have phone calls and grief. Go home, Alina. Go home while you still can. Be a grandmother to your daughter's future children. Live your quiet little life." "And if I don't?" She leaned in, her lips inches from my ear. "You have no idea how deep this goes. Sela's got himself involved in things he couldn't fix. He paid the price. Don't make the same mistake." She pulled back, smoothing the front of her coat as if she had just brushed off some dust. "This is the last time I'm going to ask you nicely. Stop." She turned on her heel and walked away. She didn't look back. She got into her silver car, the engine purred to life, and she drove slowly down the gravel path, leaving me standing alone over the empty grave. I watched her go until the taillights disappeared around the bend. My legs felt weak, shaking so hard I had to sit down on a nearby bench. She hadn't denied it, not really. She hadn't been shocked by the accusation, she had been annoyed by it, she had threatened me. "You have no idea how deep this goes." I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of damp earth and decay. Fear was there, yes, cold and slithering in my gut, but beneath it was something else. Validation. I was right. I fumbled for the burner phone in my pocket. My hands were trembling, but I forced my fingers to work. I needed confirmation from someone outside her circle, someone who knew the business but wasn't asterisk in the family. Arthur Penn. Arthur was one of the senior partners at the firm, a man Silas had trusted. He was old school, drank too much scotch, believed in the sanctity of the law, and had always been kind to me at the Christmas parties. I dialed the number I had memorized from Silas's emergency contact list. It rang 4 times. I was about to hang up when a gruff voice answered. "Hello." "Arthur," I said. "It's Alina Vance." There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear the background noise of a television, maybe a news program. "Alina," he said. His voice sounded tight, wary. I didn't expect to hear from you. I'm so sorry about Silas." "I need to ask you something, Arthur, and I need you to tell me the truth, off the record." "Alina, I can't discuss firm business. You know that." "This isn't business," I said. "This is about my husband's life. I just saw Serafina. She threatened me." "She what?" The wariness shifted to alarm. "She told me to stop digging. Arthur, please. Before Silas died, was he working on anything strange? Anything involving the Sterling Group accounts?" He sighed, a long, ragged exhalation. "Alina, don't do this." "They faked the dental records, Arthur," I said, dropping the bomb. "The body wasn't him. I know he's alive, but I need to know asterisk why." "Jesus," he whispered. "Tell me," I demanded. "You owe him that much." "He was looking into the client escrow funds," Arthur said, his voice dropping so low I had to press the phone hard against my ear. "He found discrepancies, money moving into shell companies, real estate fronts. The Sterling Group." "Yes, and others. It was massive, Alina, institutional fraud. He came to me a week before the accident. He said he had proof that the signatures were being authorized from the top." "Caleb," I asked. A pause. I saw Caleb's name on the transfer log Silas showed me. "Yes." My eyes squeezed shut. "Why didn't you go to the police?" "Because they own the police," Arthur snapped, his fear breaking through. "You don't understand who these people are. Serafina isn't just a lawyer, she's a broker for half the city's dirty money. Silas was going to blow the whistle. He was going to bring it all down." "And so they killed him," I said. "They erased asterisk him," Arthur corrected. "After the crash, the IT department wiped his servers. They shredded his physical files. It was like he never worked there. Alina, if you have proof, if he's really out there, you need to be careful. These people don't leave loose ends." "I know," I said. "Thank you, Arthur." "Alina," he said urgently, "don't call me again, for your sake and mine." The line went dead. I sat there for a moment, letting the reality settle over me like a shroud. It wasn't just embezzlement. It was a criminal empire. Serafina was the queen and Caleb was her knight. And Silas was the defector. I got back into my car. The interior felt too small, too exposed. I drove back toward the motel, checking my mirrors every few seconds. Every car looked like a threat. Every pair of headlights felt like eyes. When I pulled into the motel lot, the sun had fully set. The neon sign buzzed overhead, casting a sickly blue light over the cracked pavement. I walked into the small reception office to get fresh towels, an excuse to check the perimeter. The clerk, a pimply teenager with headphones around his neck, looked up from his phone. "Hey," he said, popping his gum, "you had a visitor." My blood ran cold. A visitor? "Yeah, earlier. Tall guy, nice suit. Looked like a Fed or something." What did he say?" "Asked if a woman driving a silver sedan was staying here. Showed me a picture." "Did you tell him?" I gripped the edge of the counter. The kid shrugged. "I told him I ain't seen nobody. I don't get paid enough to snitch on guests. He left a card, though." He slid a plain white business card across the counter. No name, no logo, just a phone number scrawled in black ink. "Did he say anything else?" "Nah, just looked around the lot for a bit and took off. Said he'd be back." "Thank you," I whispered. I grabbed the towels and hurried out, my skin crawling. They had found me. The motel wasn't safe anymore. Serafina hadn't just threatened me at the cemetery, she had sent her dogs to sniff me out. I practically ran to my room, fumbling with the key. I locked the door, threw the deadbolt, and wedged a chair under the handle. It was a futile gesture. If they wanted in, a chair wouldn't stop them, but it made me feel slightly less naked. My phone buzzed. I jumped, nearly dropping the bottle of water I was holding. I looked at the screen of the prepaid phone. Unknown number. My heart stopped. I opened the message. Stop digging or Harper gets hurt. The world narrowed down to those 6 words. Harper. My daughter. My sweet, confused, grieving daughter who was currently sleeping in the same house as Caleb Thorne. The man who was signing the illegal checks. The man who was working for Serafina. They weren't just watching me. They were holding her hostage. I sank onto the edge of the bed. Panic rose in my throat, hot and acrid. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call the police. But Arthur's voice echoed in my head. They own the police. If I called the cops, Serafina would know within minutes. If I went back, they would silence me. If I ran, they would hurt Harper to punish me. I was trapped. No. I stood up. I looked at the dark window. That's what they wanted me to feel. Trapped. Helpless. A scared widow who would curl up in a ball and beg for mercy. That's how Serafina operated. She used fear as a currency. But she had made a mistake. She had threatened my child. Fear evaporated. In its place, a cold, hard rage solidified in my chest. It was a dangerous feeling, sharp and clear. It was the feeling of a mother wolf realizing the hunters were nearing the den. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to hide. I picked up the phone. I didn't tremble this time. My fingers flew across the keypad. I typed a reply to the unknown number. If anything happens to my daughter, the evidence goes public. I have the files, I have the emails, and I have set a dead man's switch. I hit send. It was a bluff mostly. I didn't have the dead man's switch set up yet, but they didn't know that. They knew Sila's was smart. They knew he had data. They would have to assume I had it too. I turned to my laptop. I worked furiously for the next hour. I took every file I had. The coroner's report, the screenshots of the emails, the timeline of the accident, and compressed them into a single encrypted folder. Arthur had mentioned an encrypted whistleblower email once, years ago, when he was drunk at a dinner party and complaining about corporate corruption. Secure drop. I searched for the contact he had vaguely referenced back then, a journalist known for exposing financial crimes. I found a public key. I uploaded the files to a secure cloud server first, creating 3 mirror links. Then, I drafted an email to the journalist's secure drop. Subject, the Sterling Group, embezzlement and murder. Body, my name is Alina Vance. My husband was Silas Vance. He didn't die in a car accident. He was silenced because he found what I am attaching here. If I stop communicating, release everything. I didn't send it yet. I saved it as a draft, ready to launch with one click. Then I sat back in the dark, the laptop screen the only light in the room. The chair was wedged under the door. The curtains were drawn. My bag was packed. They thought they could scare me into silence. They thought threatening Harper would make me retreat. They were wrong. They had just given me the only reason I needed to burn their entire world to the ground. I watched the parking lot through a crack in the curtains. A car passed by, slowing down, then speeding up. Come on, I whispered to the empty room. Come and try. The storm had begun, and I wasn't the prey anymore. I was the bait. I left the Blue Heron Motel 20 minutes after sending that threat. I didn't wait to see if they would call my bluff. I drove south this time, weaving through back roads, doubling back at intersections, checking my rearview mirror until my eyes burned. I was no longer just a grieving widow. I was a fugitive carrying a digital bomb that could level an empire. I checked into a new place just across the county line, the Starlight Inn. It was an ironic name for a squat, brick building that smelled of industrial lemon cleaner and despair. But it had no Wi-Fi, which meant less digital footprint, and the clerk took cash without looking up from his crossword puzzle. The next morning, I drove to the public library in the neighboring town of Oakhaven. It was a sanctuary of silence, smelling of dust and old paper. Neutral ground. I found a table in the back corner, hidden behind a stack of encyclopedias. I had arranged the meeting via an encrypted message Board Arthur Penn had told me about, a digital dead drop for whistleblowers. 10 minutes later, a woman walked in. She was in her 50s, wearing a shapeless gray coat and a wool hat pulled low. Her face was lined with exhaustion, her eyes darting nervously around the room before landing on me. She clutched a canvas tote bag to her chest like a shield. This was Beatrix B. Mercer, Julian Mercer's sister. She sat down across from me, without a word, sliding her bag onto the floor between her feet. "You're Alina," she said softly. It wasn't a question. "Yes, and you're B." She nodded, her hands fidgeting with a fraying thread on her coat sleeve. "I saw the news about your husband, the accident, the fire." She looked up, her eyes wet and sharp. "They're saying it was suicide now, or reckless driving." "They're lying," I said. "I know." Bea let out a breath that sounded like a rattle in her chest. "They said Julian ran away with a mistress, that he emptied his accounts and fled to Brazil. But Julian didn't have a mistress. He didn't even have a passport. He was taking care of our mother until she passed. He wouldn't leave." "Tell me what he found, Bea, please." She glanced around the quiet library. A few students were studying near the front. A librarian was shelving books. We were invisible. "Julian was an auditor for the firm," she whispered. "He started noticing patterns in the Sterling Group's real estate holdings about 6 months ago. Properties that didn't exist. Construction loans for empty lots. The money would go in from investors, cycle through 3 or 4 shell companies, and then vanish into offshore accounts in the Caymans." "Laundering," I said. "On a massive scale," she confirmed. "Julian traced it back. He said the authorization codes for the transfers were coming from the top. He thought it was Serafina Sterling directly." "It is Serafina," I said, "but she's not signing the checks." Bea nodded grimly. "I know. Julian found that out 2 days before he disappeared. He sent me a copy of the transaction logs. He said, 'If anything happens to me, don't go to the police. Go to Silas Vance.'" My heart twisted. He trusted my husband. He said Silas was the only honest partner left in that snake pit. She reached into her tote bag and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "I've been sleeping with this under my pillow for weeks. I didn't know what to do with it until you reached out on the forum." I took the envelope. It felt heavy, solid. "What is it?" "Bank records," Bea said. "Julian printed them out. He didn't trust the cloud. These are the transfer slips from the Cayman accounts. They show the flow of money going asterisk out asterisk of the firm." I opened the flap and slid out the top sheet. It was a dense spreadsheet of numbers and routing codes. But at the bottom of the authorization column, there was a digital signature stamp. "See Thorne." "Caleb." "They killed my brother, didn't they?" Bea asked. Her voice didn't break, but a single tear tracked through the powder on her cheek. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but my husband is alive. He faked his death to escape them. If Julian was working with him, maybe he's hiding too." It was a cruel hope to offer, perhaps, but Bea seized it. Her posture straightened. "If there's a chance, then we have to finish this. We have to burn them down." "We will," I promised. "I need to digitize these. We're building a timeline. If we can prove the money laundering, the murder charges will follow." We spent the next hour working in hushed tones, mapping the web of deceit Serafina and Caleb had spun. By the time we parted ways, the sun was setting. Bea squeezed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Watch your back, Alina. Serafina Sterling has eyes everywhere." "I know," I said, "but she's looking for a victim. She's not expecting a war." Back at the Starlight Inn, the air in my room felt stale. I spent the evening scanning Bea's documents into my encrypted drive, cross-referencing them with the files I'd stolen from Silas's backup. The picture was becoming terrifyingly clear. Serafina was the architect. She had set up the structure. But Caleb, my ambitious, polished, seemingly perfect son-in-law, was the engine. He had facilitated every illegal transfer. He had sold his soul for a seat at the table. And Harper, my God, Harper was sleeping next to a monster. Around 9:00 p.m., there was a knock at the door. 3 sharp raps. I froze. My hand hovered over the laptop, ready to slam it shut. I hadn't ordered room service. No one knew I was here. I moved silently to the nightstand and picked up the heavy brass lamp I had unscrewed earlier, just in case. I crept to the door and peered through the peephole. The hallway was dim, flickering with the light of a dying bulb. Standing there, shivering in a trench coat that looked too big for her, was Harper. I unlocked the deadbolt and threw the door open. "Mom," she breathed. She looked wrecked. Her eyes were red-rimmed and swollen, her hair matted from rain or sweat. She wasn't the poised young wife I saw at Sunday dinners. She looked like a child who had been lost in the woods. "Get inside," I said, pulling her in and locking the door behind her. She collapsed onto the edge of the bed, burying her face in her hands. "You were right. I didn't want to believe you, but I found something." I sat down beside her, putting the lamp back on the table. "How did you find me?" "I remembered the old email account Dad used to use for travel," she mumbled into her palms. "The one linked to the cloud. I saw a login notification from this IP address near Oakhaven. I took a chance." She was Silas's daughter, all right. Smart, resourceful. "What did you find, Harper?" She looked up, and the pain in her eyes nearly broke me. "Caleb told me." He told me Dad was stealing from the clients. He said Dad had a gambling problem. He said Serafina found out and tried to cover it up to protect the family name, but Dad panicked and drove his car off the road. "That is a lie," I said firmly. "A script they wrote to cover their tracks." "I wanted to believe Caleb," she whispered. "He's my husband, Mom. I love him, but he's been acting so strange. He has 2 phones now. He takes calls in the garage at midnight. And then today." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. "I found this in his home office wastebasket. He shredded everything else but this one. He must have missed it." I smoothed out the paper. It was a printout of a flight itinerary. One way, to Belize, for 2 passengers, Caleb Thorne and Serafina Sterling. The date was for tomorrow night. "They're running," I realized aloud. "They know I'm getting close." "Why would they run?" Harper's voice cracked. "If Dad was the criminal, why are they running?" "Because your father wasn't the criminal, Harper. He was the witness." I stood up and grabbed my laptop. I turned the screen toward her. "I need you to look at this. I know it's going to hurt. I know it's going to feel like your life is ending, but you need to see the truth." I opened the file B had given me. The scan of the bank transfer with the Cayman routing number. "Look at the signature," I said gently. Harper squinted at the screen, her breath hitched. She traced the digital stamp on the glass, C. Thorne. "That's Caleb's signature," she whispered. That's the account he told me was for his bonus. He bought the boat with this money." "It's client money, Harper, stolen from the firm's trust, millions of dollars." I clicked to the next file, the falsified dental records report, the timeline discrepancy, the email from Julian Mercer warning Silas to run. "Caleb isn't protecting the family," I said, my voice low and steady. "He is protecting himself. He helped Serafina launder money, and when your father found out, they tried to kill him." "Tried," Harper's head snapped up. "Mom, you said tried." I took both her hands in mine. They were ice cold. "Silas is alive, Harper. I saw him at the funeral. He texted me. He's the one who told me to run." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing as she tried to process the impossible. "He's alive." "Yes, he had to disappear to stay safe, to keep us safe. But Serafina knows, and Caleb knows." Harper let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. Tears spilled over, running freely now. "My God, I've been sleeping next to. I've been living with." "I know," I said, pulling her into my arms. "I know, baby." She clung to me, shaking violently. We sat there on the cheap motel bed, holding each other while the world outside threatened to crush us. I stroked her hair, just like I did when she was a little girl afraid of thunderstorms. I feel so stupid, she wept into my shoulder. He lied to me every day. He looked me in the eye and lied. He's a predator, Harper. They are experts at camouflage. You aren't stupid. You were loyal. There is a difference. We stayed like that for a long time. Eventually, her sobbing subsided into quiet hiccups. She pulled back, wiping her face with her sleeve. Her eyes were swollen, but the confusion was gone. In its place was a hardening, the same look I had seen in the mirror days ago. "What do we do?" she asked. For the first time, she said we asterisk. "We wait," I said, "and we collect everything. We have the bank records now, we have the flight itinerary, we have proof of intent to flee." "I can't go back there," she said, panic rising in her voice. "I can't look at him." "You have to," I said. It was the hardest thing I'd ever had to ask of her. "If you disappear tonight, they'll know you're with me. They'll know we're working together. They might speed up their timeline. You have to go back. You have to pretend you bought his story." "Mom." "Just for one more day, Harper. Can you do that? Can you look at him and lie just like he lied to you?" She took a deep breath. She looked at the laptop screen one last time, at the signature of the man she had married. "Yes," she said, "I can do that." She stayed the night. We shared the narrow double bed, neither of us sleeping much. I listened to her breathing, erratic and shallow, and felt a fierce, burning protectiveness. Serafina and Caleb had stolen my husband, stolen our peace, and stolen my daughter's innocence. They were going to pay for every second of this. In the morning, Harper left before dawn. She washed her face, fixed her hair, and put the mask of the grieving, supportive wife back on. "Be careful," I told her at the door. "Don't challenge him. Just be the Harper he thinks he controls." "He doesn't control me," she said. Her voice was cold. "Not anymore." I watched her drive away, her taillights fading into the morning mist. My heart felt heavy but steady. I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. 2 hours later, my burner phone buzzed. Unknown number. I stared at it, another threat. They were desperate now. I opened it. "You think you're clever. We know she was there. Stop while you still can." They had seen Harper, or they had tracked her car. I didn't feel fear this time. I felt clarity. They were watching, yes, but they were watching because they were terrified. They were lashing out like cornered animals. I didn't reply. I deleted the message. I opened my leather-bound journal, the one I used to use for grocery lists and lesson plans. I turned to a blank page. I uncapped my pen and wrote a single line, pressing down so hard the ink bled through the paper. "They are watching me, but I am watching them too." I picked up the phone and dialed B. "It's me," I said when she answered. "Harper is safe, she's on our side, and I know when they're planning to leave." "When?" B asked. "Tomorrow night, a flight to Belize, we don't have much time." "I'm ready," B said. "I'm meeting the contact from the DA's office at noon. Are you sure we have enough?" I looked at the stack of files on the table. The bank transfers, the flight logs, the dental records, the lies. "We have enough to bury them," I said. "Let's finish this." I closed the journal. The hunt was over. The trap was set. That evening, the air in the motel room felt heavy, charged with the static of an approaching storm. I had packed my bags, ready to move again, but I hadn't left yet. I was waiting for B's confirmation that the meeting with the district attorney was set. I was sitting by the window, watching the rain streak the glass when the lock clicked. I didn't jump. I didn't reach for the lamp this time. I just turned slowly in my chair as the door swung open. Serafina Sterling stood there. She wasn't wearing her usual pristine armor of tailored wool. She wore a trench coat, wet at the shoulders, and her hair was slightly loose, a few strands escaping the chignon. It was the first time I had ever seen her look anything less than perfect. "You really need to change the locks in these places, Alina," she said, closing the door behind her. "It's dangerously easy to get a master key." "Get out," I said calmly. She ignored me, walking into the room and glancing at the laptop on the bed, the stack of files. She didn't look angry. She looked disappointed. I offered you an olive branch, she said, peeling off her leather gloves. I offered you family, protection, and instead you've decided to play crusader. I decided to find the truth, I said. The truth, Serafina laughed softly. The truth is messy, Alina. The truth is that Silas was weak. He couldn't do what needed to be done to keep the firm, to keep us afloat. He panicked. He was going to destroy everything my father built over a few accounting errors. Money laundering isn't an accounting error, I said, and murder isn't business. She stopped moving, her eyes locked onto mine. We didn't kill him, he did that to himself. He ran, he abandoned you. He abandoned Harper. And yet, here you are burning down your own life to vindicate a ghost. He didn't abandon us, he was driven out. Does it matter? She reached into her coat pocket. My muscles tensed, but she only pulled out a white envelope. She tossed it onto the bed. This ends tonight, Alina. Caleb and I are leaving for a business trip tomorrow. When we return, I expect you to be gone. Go back to your teaching job. Move to Florida, I don't care, but if you release those files, well. She nodded toward the envelope. I didn't reach for it. What is that? Insurance, she said. Open it when I leave. She walked to the door, her hand on the knob. She paused, looking back at me with a chilling maternal pity. You won't win, Alina. You're a school teacher fighting a corporation. You're out of your depth. I already won, I said quietly. You just don't see it yet. Serafina's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. Then she shook her head, smirked, and walked out. I waited until I heard her car drive away before I picked up the envelope. Inside was a single photograph. It was taken today. Harper, sitting at a cafe table, staring at her phone. The angle was from across the street. In the foreground, out of focus but unmistakable, was the blurry outline of a gun in someone's lap, pointed in her direction. On the back, in block letters, keep quiet or she disappears. My hands shook, but not with fear. Not anymore. The shaking was pure, distilled rage. They thought this would break me. They thought this would send me scurrying into the dark. Instead, it was the final permission I needed. My burner phone buzzed. It was B. It's set, noon tomorrow. Warehouse 4 by the river. The DA's contact is ready. I typed back. They're coming too, I made sure of it. Are you sure about this? B asked. I looked at the photo of Harper one last time before tearing it in half. Yes, let them come. The warehouse district was a graveyard of industry, rusted skeletons of old factories, broken windows, and the smell of the river, thick with oil and brine. Warehouse 4 was a cavernous brick structure at the end of a dead-end road. I arrived at 11:45 a.m. I wore the same black coat I had worn to the funeral. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. I was here to bury something, but this time it wouldn't be my husband. I stood in the center of the empty floor. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light cutting through the high windows. It was silent, save for the dripping of water somewhere in the shadows. I held a single flash drive in my hand. It contained everything. The bank transfers B had found, the flight logs Harper had stolen, the dental records, the emails. At noon precisely, the sound of an engine broke the silence. Tires crunched on gravel outside. Car doors slammed. I didn't turn around. I heard the heavy sliding metal door groan as it was pushed open. Footsteps echoed on the concrete. 2 sets. You really are a glutton for punishment, Alina. I turned. Serafina stood there, flanked by Caleb. They looked out of place in the grime, Serafina in a cream silk suit, Caleb in a tailored navy blazer. Caleb looked smug, his hands in his pockets. Serafina looked bored. There was no DA, no police, just them. Where is your contact? Caleb asked, looking around the empty space with a sneer. Did he get cold feet, or did you realize no one is coming to save you? I wanted to look you in the eye, I said, my voice echoing off the metal rafters. One last time. Serafina sighed, stepping forward. Her heels clicked sharply. This is melodrama, Alina. Give us the drive, we know you have it. We scrubbed your cloud uploads this morning. My IT team is very efficient. My heart hammered, but I kept my face impassive. You can't scrub the truth. I can scrub you asterisk, Caleb spat, his arrogance finally slipping into aggression. He took a step toward me. You think you're smart. You're a nuisance. We offered you a way out. Now, he shrugged. Now you're a liability. Like Silas was, I asked. Silas was a fool, Caleb said. He had the world handed to him and he grew a conscience. It was pathetic. So you admit it, I said. You admit you tried to kill him. We tried to manage him, Serafina corrected coldly. The accident, well, that was his own doing. He panicked. He drove too fast. If he died, it's because he was weak. He didn't die, I said. The silence that followed was heavy. Caleb laughed, a short barking sound. Oh God, you're still on this? Elena, we saw the report. We saw the car. You saw what you wanted to see, I said. You covered everything perfectly. The dental records, the closed casket, but you didn't count on one thing. I reached into my pocket. Caleb flinched, his hand flying to his waistband. I saw the glint of a holster. I pulled out my phone. You didn't count on him surviving. I turned the screen toward them. It was a photo B had recovered from a traffic camera near the crash site, time-stamped 3 minutes after the fire started. It was grainy, black and white, but unmistakable. A man stumbling away from the burning wreckage, limping, holding his arm, looking back at the fire. Silas. Serafina's face drained of color, her composure cracked, a jagged fissure running through her perfect mask. She snatched the phone from my hand, staring at the screen. That's impossible, she whispered. The car exploded. He got out, I said. He crawled out while you were busy writing the press release. Where is he? Caleb demanded. His voice was high, shrill with panic. He pulled a gun from his holster, a sleek black pistol. He pointed it at my chest. Tell me where he is, Elena, or I swear to God I will put you in the ground right here. Put the gun away, Caleb, Serafina hissed, but she didn't look up from the photo. Her mind was racing, calculating the damage. No, Caleb shouted. He's alive. That means he can testify. That means it's over unless we find him. He advanced on me, the gun barrel shaking slightly. Where is he? I'm right here. The voice came from the shadows behind them. Deep, raspy, familiar. Serafina spun around. Caleb froze. Silas stepped out from behind a rusted pillar. He looked older. There was a scar running down the left side of his jaw that I hadn't seen before, silver and jagged. He was thinner, his hair graying at the temples. He wore cheap clothes, jeans, and a dark jacket, but he stood tall. Silas, Serafina breathed. It sounded like a prayer and a curse. Hello, sister, Silas said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were blazing. You, Caleb lowered the gun slightly, shock overriding his training. You're supposed to be dead. I tried, Silas said, walking slowly toward them. I thought if I disappeared, you'd leave Elena alone. I thought if I gave you the firm, you'd be satisfied. He stopped 10 feet away, standing next to me. He didn't look at me, but I felt his presence like a shield. But you're greedy, Caleb. You couldn't just take the money. You had to threaten my daughter. She's my wife, Caleb yelled, aiming the gun at Silas now. She's your victim, Silas corrected, and she knows everything. It doesn't matter, Serafina said, regaining her icy control. She dropped my phone to the concrete, shattering the screen. So you're alive, congratulations. It changes nothing. In fact, it makes this cleaner, a tragic murder-suicide. Distraught widow meets her husband who faked his death. Things get heated. She looked at Caleb. Do it. Caleb raised the gun, his finger tightening on the trigger. I wouldn't, I said loudly. Caleb hesitated. Why? You got backup coming, your little library friend. I reached into my other pocket and pulled out a small digital recorder. The red light was blinking steadily. I've been recording since you walked in, I said. Every word, the admission of money laundering, the admission of the cover-up, the threat to kill us. Who are you going to show it to? Serafina scoffed. Dead people don't testify. I'm not showing it to anyone, I said. It's being live-streamed. Serafina's eyes went wide. To whom? She whispered. I pointed upward, toward the high, broken windows. To them. From the catwalks above, floodlights suddenly blazed to life, blindingly bright white beams cutting through the gloom. Police, drop the weapon. The voice boomed from a megaphone, echoing off the steel walls. Drop it now. Caleb panicked. He swung the gun wildly toward the ceiling, then back at Sila's. Don't do it, son, Sila said calmly. It's over. For a second, I thought Caleb would shoot. I saw the madness in his eyes, the realization that his life of luxury was gone. But then he looked at the red laser dots dancing on his chest. 3, 4, 5 of them. He dropped the gun. It clattered loudly on the concrete. He fell to his knees, hands on his head, sobbing. Serafina didn't move. She stood perfectly still, squinting against the lights. She looked at Sila's, then at me. You set me up, she said. Her voice was full of genuine shock. You, the school teacher. You underestimated me, I said, stepping closer to her. You thought I was just a wife. You forgot I was a mother. The side doors of the warehouse burst open. A SWAT team swarmed in, moving with precise, chaotic violence. Officers shouted commands. Caleb was slammed to the ground and cuffed. Serafina allowed herself to be turned around. She didn't resist. As the officer pulled her arms behind her back, she looked over her shoulder at me. This destroys the family, Alina, she said. You know that. The family was already destroyed, I said. I'm just taking out the trash. They led her away. The noise was deafening, radios squawking, heavy boots shouting. But in the center of the whirlwind, there was a pocket of silence. I turned to Sila's. He was looking at me. His eyes were tired, filled with a sorrow so deep it looked like physical pain. I wanted to tell you, he whispered. Every day I wanted to pick up the phone, but I was so afraid they'd hurt you. I know, I said. My voice broke, the adrenaline finally crashing, leaving me trembling. He reached out, his hand hovering uncertainly. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed his hand. It was warm, rough, real. You saved us, he said. I shook my head, squeezing his fingers until my knuckles turned white. No, I said, we saved ourselves. An officer approached us, lowering his weapon. Mrs. Vance, Mr. Vance, we need to get you to safety. The district attorney is waiting outside. Silas nodded. He didn't let go of my hand. We walked out of the warehouse together, into the blinding midday sun. The air smelled of the river and rain, but for the first time in weeks, it didn't smell of fear. The trap had sprung, the cage was open, and we were finally truly free. The following days moved like a slow, heavy tide. Everything happened at once, yet it felt strangely quiet, as if I were watching it all from underwater. The immediate aftermath in the warehouse was a blur of blue lights and static radios. I stood by the open bay doors, watching the dismantling of the Sterling Empire happen in real time. Caleb Thorne was the first to be let out. The arrogance that had defined him, the tailored suits, the sneer, the way he looked down on waitstaff had evaporated. He was weeping openly, stumbling as the officers guided him toward the cruiser. He kept shouting that he wanted to cut a deal, that he had been manipulated, that it wasn't his fault. I have information, he screamed, his voice cracking. I can give you everything. No one listened. His lawyer, who had arrived minutes after the SWAT team, just dropped his head into his hands. Caleb was radioactive. Then came Serafina. She was a study in contrast. Her hands were cuffed behind her back, but she walked with her head high, her spine steel straight. She didn't look at the police. She didn't look at the cameras that were already gathering outside the perimeter. She looked at me. As she passed, she paused for a fraction of a second. Her hair was messy, her silk suit ruined by the grime of the warehouse floor, but her expression was one of absolute, terrifying calm. You played the game well, Alina, she said softly. But remember, games have second rounds. Not this one, I said, my voice steady. This wasn't a game, it was my life. An officer nudged her forward. She got into the back of the police car with the grace of a queen entering a carriage. Even in handcuffs, she refused to let the world see her break. I turned back to the shadows of the warehouse. Silas was sitting on a crate, a paramedic checking his blood pressure. He looked exhausted, the adrenaline fatting to leave him gray and shaking. I walked over to him. The paramedic stepped back to give us space. "They're gone," I said. Silas looked up. He reached out and took my hand, his grip loose, tired. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again. Not really." "I told you," I whispered, brushing a smudge of dirt from his cheek. "I'm stubborn." He managed a weak, crooked smile. "You are, thank God for that." We didn't kiss. We didn't have a movie star reunion. We just sat there, leaning against each other, two survivors in the wreckage, breathing in the smell of the river and the dust. For the first week, the district attorney placed us in a safe house, a small, cedar-sided cabin near the edge of the state forests, overlooking a valley of pine. It was isolated, quiet, and secure. It was strange to be in a room with a dead man. The first night, we barely spoke. We just existed in the same space, relearning the sounds of each other's breathing. But on the second night, with a fire crackling in the hearth and the rain tapping against the roof, a sound that no longer frightened me, Silas finally explained. We sat at the small kitchen table with mugs of tea. He stared into the dark liquid as if reading the future. "I found the laundering scheme 3 months ago," he began, his voice raspy. "I tried to fix it internally. I went to Serafina, I genuinely thought she didn't know, that it was a rogue operation." He laughed bitterly. "She looked me in the eye and told me to grow up. She said the family legacy required flexibility. Then she told me that if I went to the authorities, she'd frame me. She had the paper trail ready. My name was already on dummy accounts I didn't know existed." "And Caleb?" I asked. "Caleb was her insurance policy. He married Harper to get close to the money, Alina. He was in on it before the wedding." I felt a cold shiver, thinking of my daughter. "So the accident," I prompted. "How?" "I had a client years ago," Silas said. "A man who worked in body transport. He owed me a favor. He found a John Doe in the city morgue, no family, similar build. We staged the crash. I put my watch on him, I doused the car, and then..." He paused, his eyes closing. "I watched it burn. I stood in the woods and watched my life go up in smoke. I wanted to call you. I had the phone in my hand a dozen times, but I knew Serafina. If she thought I was alive, she'd never stop hunting. I had to be dead for you to be safe." "But she didn't stop," I said softly. "She kept watching me." "Because she's paranoid. She needed to make sure I hadn't left a trail." He looked at me, his eyes wet. "I underestimated her cruelty, but I underestimated your strength even more." "We both did," I said. I reached across the table. He took my hand. It wasn't the same hand I had held at our wedding. It was rougher, older, but it was his. The news broke the next morning. It was a firestorm. Dead attorney found alive. Massive fraud ring exposed. Sterling Empire collapses. The headlines were relentless. The story had everything: money, murder, faked deaths, a mother turning detective. My face was on the front page of the local paper. Silas's mugshot from the police station was on the national news. But we stayed in the cabin, insulated from the noise. Harper arrived on the third day. When she walked through the door, she hesitated. She looked at her father, standing by the fireplace, and for a moment I saw the fear in her eyes, the fear that this was a ghost, a trick. "Dad," she whispered. "Hi, honey," Silas said, his voice breaking. She ran to him. The force of her impact nearly knocked him over. She buried her face in his shoulder, sobbing the kind of deep, chest-heaving sobs that had been suppressed for weeks. I stood back, letting them have the moment, but then Harper pulled away and turned to me. Her face was ravaged with guilt. "I didn't know," she choked out. "Mom, I swear, I didn't know about Caleb. I slept in the same bed with him while he..." "Stop," I said, stepping forward and pulling her into the embrace. "You were a victim, Harper, just like us. He deceived everyone." "I feel so dirty," she whispered. "I feel like I let him into our lives." You loved a lie, Silas said gently, putting a hand on her back. That's not a crime. It just means you have a good heart. Don't let him take that from you, too. We spent the night together in the cabin. We cooked a simple dinner. We didn't talk about the trial or the money. We talked about small things, the weather, the trees outside, the memories of times before the darkness. We were a family again, fractured, scarred, and weary, but real. The legal process was a slow, grinding machine. It took 6 months for the trial to conclude. Silas was granted full immunity in exchange for his testimony and the surrender of his law license. He was legally dead for a month before the courts reversed the certificate. It was a bureaucratic nightmare, but Arthur Penn, good, decent Arthur, came out of retirement to handle it for us pro bono. The trial itself was a circus, but the verdict, when it finally came, was absolute. I sat in the front row of the gallery, holding Silas's hand. The courtroom was packed. Reporters scribbled furiously. Serafina stood to hear her sentence. She wore a prison-issue jumpsuit, but she wore it like couture. She looked bored, as if the judge were a waiter taking too long with her order. Guilty on all counts: conspiracy, grand larceny, attempted murder, obstruction of justice. The judge sentenced her to 25 years without the possibility of parole. She didn't flinch. She simply nodded, turned to her lawyer, and whispered something that looked like a reprimand. Then it was Caleb's turn. He was a husk of a man. He had lost 20 pounds. His hair was thinning. When the judge read his sentence, 15 years, he collapsed onto the defense table, wailing. "It's not fair," he sobbed. "I just did what she told me." I looked at Harper, sitting on my other side. She wasn't crying. She was watching the man she had married with a look of detached curiosity, like she was observing a stranger. "It's over," she whispered. I looked at Serafina one last time as the bailiffs led her away. She caught my eye. She didn't smile. She didn't glare. She just looked. Empty. Her power was gone. Her name was mud. The Sterling Empire was dust. I squeezed Silas's hand. He squeezed back. We walked out of the courthouse into a sea of flashbulbs, but we didn't stop to speak. We got into our car and drove away, leaving the city in the rearview mirror. We didn't go back to the suburbs. We couldn't. That house was full of ghosts and the memory of white roses. We moved to the coast, 3 states away. A small town where the wind always smelled of salt and the fog rolled in thick every morning. We bought a small, weathered house with peeling blue paint and a porch that overlooked the gray Atlantic. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. We had nightmares. Some nights, Silas would wake up shouting, thinking he was back in the burning car. Some days I would check my phone 10 times an hour, waiting for a threatening text that would never come. We were jumpy in crowds. We didn't trust easily. But we were free. Our days fell into a simple, healing rhythm. I started tutoring literature at the local library. The students were young and didn't know who I was. To them, I was just Mrs. Vance who liked poetry. Silas stopped being a lawyer. He said he never wanted to see a contract again. Instead, he started working with his hands. He built a shed in the backyard, then a deck. He spent hours sanding wood, the sawdust coating his arms. He said the physical labor quieted his mind. One evening, 6 months after the move, I was in the garden, planting hydrangeas, blue ones, never white. The sun was setting, casting a long, golden path across the ocean. Silas was on the porch, wiping his hands on a rag. Harper had come up for the weekend. She was sitting on the railing, laughing at something Silas said. She looked healthier now. She had taken back her maiden name. She was starting over, too. She hopped off the railing and walked over to me, holding a small cardboard box. "I found this in my storage unit," she said. "I thought you might want it, or maybe you want to destroy it." I opened the box. Inside was my old phone, the one I had used on the day of the funeral. The police had returned it after the investigation closed, and Harper had kept it safe. I took it out. It still had a charge. I powered it on. The screen lit up, glowing bright in the twilight. I went to the messages. Most were gone, archived or deleted by the police, but one thread remained. The timestamp was from that rainy morning in the church. Unknown, ***, run. They're watching us. I stared at the words. For so long they had been a source of terror, a command. Now they were just pixels, a relic of a life that didn't exist anymore. Silas walked down the steps and stood beside me. He looked at the phone, then at me. "You don't need that," he said quietly. "I know," I said. I pressed *delete*. "Are you sure?" the screen asked. "Yes." The message vanished. I turned the phone off and handed it back to Harper. "Throw it in the ocean," I said. "Or recycle it, I don't care. I'm done with it." Harper smiled and tossed it into the recycling bin by the shed. I looked at my husband. The scar on his jaw was silver now, a permanent map of where we had been. I reached out and touched it. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't seen me that day?" he asked. "If you had just driven home with Serafina?" "All the time," I admitted. He nodded, looking out at the horizon where the water met the sky. "You could have believed the lie. You could have lived a comfortable life." "I tried," I said. "But the truth has a weight to it, Silas. You can't bury it forever." "And it led you back," he said. "It led us here," I corrected. The tide was coming in, the waves crashing rhythmically against the rocks below. It was a steady, relentless sound. It didn't care about money or power or lies. It just was. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cold, clean air. I thought about my journal, the entry I had written in the motel room. "They are watching me, but I am watching them too." I didn't need to watch anyone anymore. "Come on," Silas said, wrapping his arm around my shoulders. "It's getting cold. Let's go inside." I looked at the darkened house, the warm yellow light spilling from the kitchen window. It wasn't grand, it wasn't perfect, but it was safe, and it was ours. "Okay," I said. We walked up the path together, leaving the garden behind. The storm was over. The silence wasn't empty anymore, it was full of peace. And for the first time in a very long time, everything around me, the wind, the water, the man holding my hand, was finally beautifully true.